David Connolly, CEO of the Irish Wind Energy Association. Welcome to the bar.
Great to be here. Thanks very much, Gary.
But how are you?
Good. Yeah, no, good. Surviving okay. Yeah, it's been a big change. I think different work style, different work routine, but overall, it's like we've managed fairly well and kind of adjusted to the new normal fairly rapidly out of necessity as much as anything.
Yeah. And your team, obviously, they're spread out. Um, and
Yeah,
you're,
so I suppose if you take so as a trade association, like IWEA is always out and about in general day-to-day life for a lot of the team. So like our company is 15 people, about half of us are always in meetings or out about in the office. So when the lockdown came, like we're all on laptops, we're all on cloud servers. Like I remember the day the announcement was made that the schools were closing. The announcement came at about 11 or 12 o'clock that day. By close of business, we had shut down the company physical premises and we're working from home the next day. So let's say from internal IWEA organization, the team very used to being, let's say, working from outside the office. So it was a fairly easy turnaround in terms of logistics for us to go from physically sitting in the same office as
and,
one another to being
and,
out and about.
and for you, I forgot to say, it's Dr. David Connolly. So
Yeah,
you didn't get the nod from the HSC, I guess. You're a different type of doctor, are you?
yeah, much more boring point type of doctor. So yeah, no, I did a PhD in energy planning in the University of Limerick back in 2008, 2011. So
Wow.
yeah, back when I was in the nuts and bolts of modeling the Irish energy system and how it could work. And actually, ironically, I have the cup I use for my coffee is from my days as a professor in Aalborg University. We did heating strategies for the European Commission, and
Wow.
this cup is from the day that the European Commission made a heat strategy for the EU. They launched it in 2015 using our research. So that's my previous life, Gary. That's where the DR comes from.
Well, there you go. Because most people that I'm speaking to, with a lot of bit more time and whatever, they're and including myself, I've gone and I've reacquainted myself with my guitar and I'm
Mm.
replaying. As a man that has spent not only his school days and his college days, but gone back and done. When you look at education and you look at learning, do you twitch at this stage, or do you still like to do a few courses in your spare time?
I love learning something new every day, but I no longer need to do a course. The wind energy sector teaches me something new every 2 hours, and I don't even. That's not even an exaggeration. It's literally a constant evolving learning curve. There's a new challenge tomorrow that I didn't even know anything about today. So I think that's what makes like the job is very like the wind energy sector has been changing so much in the last 12, 18 months, especially. There's never a day that goes by that you're not hearing a member. Like we have 160 organizations in IWEA, everything from the start of a project where there's a blank greenfield site all the way through to the operation of the asset for 30, 35 years. You'll never know it all. So I learn something new literally every few hours. I hear something that is new to me. So it's exciting as part of it. I enjoy that kind of constantly new information coming my way.
And you, as a person, obviously, we're getting a sense, even from the few minutes we're talking, that you're obviously a scholar and you're articulate and you've done a lot of work for the EU. But what else have you learned about yourself? Say,
Yeah, I think the one thing I learned the most is that I actually enjoy my commute a lot more than I thought I did. So I actually, one thing I realized I really miss that. Like my commute is fairly short. It's going from Dublin out to Naas where our office is, or else I'm on a bike for 20 minutes into the city centre if I'm going that way. So I'm based in Chapel Izard and I'm either in Naas at the office or in the city centre at meetings. But I almost miss that two things about it. One is just that 20 minutes either on the bike or in the car where you're on your own, and have some time to almost think. But the other thing is it almost provides a very clear line between the start of the day and the end of the day that I miss a lot in the last few months. That line is kind of gone. You wake up in the morning, you're in the office, you go to bed at night, you're in the office, so I think that's the one thing I've learned is that I used to complain a lot about having to drive or cycle or having to do the commute. I think I've grown to appreciate that a lot more than I realized.
isn't that really interesting? Because I liberated myself from a necktie about 20 odd years ago. Um, but what I found from talking to some guys is that the first few weeks they were fine, they were able to be
Mm,
disciplined, and people have now started. Well, I guess it's well, I won't be sexist. Let's say it's male and female, but they're dressing more. They're putting their suit on maybe, or their
Yeah,
fitted
yeah,
shirt on, because it's to your point. It's not that they need a suit of arms. They're trying to get into disciplines that start something and end something, rather than everything just being a stew of the same,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I guess that's what you're saying there. It's more the discipline. You could go on your bike, of course. You go cycling around for 20 minutes if you want, but it's more you leave one and you go into another, and your mind goes into a different place, maybe.
Yeah, exactly it. Like, so usually, like on the commute home, even you almost digest what happened during the day. And sometimes when you'd walk through the door at the end of the day, like the first thing I might do is go for a short run, or you'd have dinner, or you'd catch up with the family. That almost provided a very kind of right, work
Yeah,
has ended, the last hour or two of the day where you get downtime has started. But in this new world, you kind of sometimes forget where one starts and the other ends. So it's kind of a funny one. I would have complained about commuting a lot and would have always thought, you know what, I'd hate to do it. But now I kind of miss that, even though it's only a short thing, I miss that little bit of a physical. And look, there's new ways you can probably do it. I just haven't kind of got myself into the headspace yet of
and
managing that line.
you mentioned family there. How have they been? Have they? I'm here myself with some 17 and 11-year-old, and I must say that they really have been gritty on days that the house haven't been up for it. They seem to always be adapting and changing, and I must say that we call them snowflakes, is it? But they're hardy little souls, I
Yeah, well, I kind of like sometimes you'd feel a bit guilty about saying this, but actually the lockdown has probably been a plus for me on the family side. I have a newborn from only 7, 8 months ago. I've just turned
Oh,
8 months
wow,
there last week. So, like,
wow,
from a selfish point of view, I've got to see things I probably would have never seen had I been in the office. So, like, even sometimes at lunchtime, I get to go out and like I got to see her eat for the first time. I got to see her try new food for the first time. I got to see her crawl for the first time.
yeah,
All things that I'd very likely have missed out on had I not been in lockdown. So, kind
yeah.
of from a selfish point of view, I've got some benefits in that end that I wouldn't have expected to had I been in normal office life, let's say.
And David, I have to say that both to you and some of the other people on this, that we're in this situation, and we didn't want to be in this situation, but we're in it, right? So actually finding the pluses and the benefits from it
Yeah.
is actually bringing out, and it does, doesn't it? Crisis brings out the best and the worst in humanity, and I think it's those that can adjust and say, okay, well, I got to do that. The positives, as you say, during it. And then you move on. As you know, we work in the data business, and I'm always saying that Ireland has been 60 years of overnight success to become a data capital of the world. It feels that way to me when I listen to you, that 20 years of slog and suddenly you're nearly Vogue. I put the nearly in. You're nearly cool. You guys are nearly cool. You're sort of nearly.
Yeah.
But 20 years Ireland has been involved in capturing the resources, natural resources. But it seems now, with the Green Deal from Europe, with the program from government, and unfortunately with the impending possibility of fines in other parts of our society, is a sort of cool a bit, I think.
Yeah, well, I like to think so, but I think, like in general, I always think the wind energy story is the great untold climate action story of Ireland. Like, I think Irish people, we love being good at things. We love punching above our weight. Wind energy is certainly one area we can say we've absolutely excelled and done something that the rest of the world would look at and think that is astonishing. Like, so we're now the highest share of electricity from onshore wind in Europe, just passed out Denmark there about 2 years ago. A third of our electricity came from onshore wind last year. Like, we built 24 wind farms last year. We built another 4 in the first quarter this year. We actually provided 47% of electricity in the first quarter of this year, which is just staggering. Like, one of the guys in the office, the way he says it is, if you imagine in the first quarter of this year, every time you turned on a light switch, 1 in every 2 times was a wind farm that was providing that electricity. That's indigenous, local, clean, environmentally friendly electricity. And yet the dialogue around climate action in Ireland is always about what we didn't achieve or what we underachieved on. And I think it's a shame that the enormous achievements of the wind energy and clean electricity sector, like Air Grid, ESP Networks,
Yeah.
ourselves in the wind energy sector, are kind of lost in that dialogue a lot, because it truly is like astonishing what has been achieved. Like most other countries that are doing what we're doing, they're connected to neighbors, they have help from their neighbors doing it. We're an isolated island west of Europe. We have to do it all on our own. We have to manage the variability on our own, and to achieve things like, over a full quarter, almost half of your electricity from a local clean indigenous resource, and that has been done over 20 years of hard work. That's been, back 28 years ago,
Yeah.
the first turbine was built in Mayo.
Yeah.
Nobody thought at that stage in 28 years time, actually half our electricity, over a quarter, will come from these devices. So it's been a
I
hard
do.
slog.
I do think, though, we may have replaced you, or the data industry may have replaced you as the least understood industry. That actually, when we write the book in 20 years, people will say, "Oh, if I only had known." But there's no doubt that when I look, and we talk regularly, and when I look at what you guys have achieved, I'm not a technical dude like you, but I understand the variability of something like wind, and to have continued to beat the drum. The technology has been there, and all the rest, but it's not about the technology. It's about your ability, and I must commend you for this, to stick at it with the communities, with the societal changes, to get people, and to change local legislation now, that people are now starting to be part of the benefit, not just from the clean of the energy, but now you've got where communities can actually financially be part of the show. How hard was that to make that transition? Because you're quite technical and your colleagues are quite
Yeah.
technical, and a lot of the people that your partners are quite technical, and now you've sort of become this part of the community, and that must have been an interesting transition.
Yeah, well, I'd say like back about 7 years ago is when that all started. But it's like you say, Gary, that slog takes a long time before the results start to appear on the other side. So in the same way as, the technology started 28 years ago, the effort started 28 years ago on the high kind of delivery side. I think there was a huge change about 6, 7 years ago on the community side. I think the funding was one big change, in terms of like when a wind farm is built in an area, there's a lot of funding provided directly to the local area. Right now, it's about €60,000 per turbine. In the next few years, it's going up to about $250,000 per turbine. Like that, I grew up in rural Ireland. That's astonishing amounts of funding to stimulate local
And
areas. But I
is
think,
that ring fenced? Is that ring fenced?
yeah, it's ring fence for the people who live local to the wind farm. Like actually right now, wind farms pay about 30 million in rates to local authorities, but that's not ring fenced to the people
No.
who live directly around the wind farm. That's used by
Yeah.
local authorities to build roads. That's actually probably going to increase to about 70, 80, 90 million in the next few years, because there's been a tripling of wind farm rates recently. So it's enormous amounts of, let's say, stimulus going into rural areas all around Ireland right as we speak. But
Yeah.
I would say, as well as the funding side, I know the funding matters. It shows you're serious. I think what was even more significant 6, 7 years ago is like the way we went about developing a wind farm. We started talking to communities far earlier, like right when as soon as you knew that this might be a wind farm. Whereas before that, people didn't think there was the appetite to talk at that stage. Like people thought people aren't interested in talking about a wind farm before you even know it's happening. But there was this almost a reach out of, well, actually, no, there is an appetite to know what's going on at a really early stage. And that's been a huge, huge change. Like, actually one of the really good barometers is the wind energy guidelines were just consulted on earlier this year. There was only 500 submissions this time around. 7 years ago, when they were last consulted on, there was half the wind energy, but there was over 10 times the amount of submissions. There was 7,500 submissions. So in the
Okay.
last 6, 7 years, we've doubled the amount of wind energy, and the amount of submissions has gone down by less than 10%.
When
I
you
think
say
that's kind of a good,
submissions, people that are, what's the favorite word? NIMBY, sort of.
well, people who are like it could be both positive and negative submissions. But
Okay.
like, normally people submit something if they have a concern. Like we would have made one submission as IWEA. A lot of our members, I'd say maybe 100 were our members that were probably on the positive side. Of
Yeah.
course, we don't know, what the other 400 were, but usually people submit things to consultations when they have a concern. That's kind of the
Yeah.
nature of most areas. But
But
whatever about
change,
what
change is happening. You know,
Yeah, look at
change.
the climate action thing as well has been amazing. Like the youth movement, like just to give you a sense of it, like wind energy in Ireland saves more carbon emissions than everything else renewable energy wise combined. So if you added up everything else what they're doing,
Yeah,
wind energy is doing it more on its own. And I think once you made that connection between, right, people want climate action, wind energy is doing a huge amount of that. All of a sudden, how people view a wind farm, I think, becomes totally different because it's now a solution to a problem
yeah,
we all have. And to be honest, I think that's why the wind energy sector continue with the slog. Like, as a lot of the members often say when we discuss things, we have to succeed. You know, if we don't,
yeah.
it's a problem for everyone. Like we have to figure out a way to solve the problems. We have to try and come up with solutions because ultimately we needed to deliver.
And it's an extraordinary story because I was on briefly on a call this morning for offshore wind, listening to
Mm.
the people down in Cork, Marie. It's a more
Yeah, the air wind project, I'd say you
Airwind project.
were,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And what was extraordinary was the catalyst for the discussion around hydrogen, green hydrogen gas, which is sort of, to me as a non-technical person, that on-demand ability of to create a gas from wind energy that
Mm.
can be stored, distributed with the national gas network, cutting down costs. And then it's that turn off, turn on when you need it. It
It
seemed
eliminates the variability problem.
it eliminates exactly. It also then gets away, and we all have to be more conscious of batteries and stuff. They're great and they do all the things they do, but they also have a shadow in places that they bring the cobalt and all this. You're just starting to get a picture emerge that technology is not going to be the inhibitor for someone like Ireland, not just to hit the 70%, David, but to be an exporter of certain amounts. And that, I suppose, leads me into sort of where we cross over, you and I, which is my thesis has always been and will continue to be that the natural resources are exactly that, that they're an asset to the country. And we can either export the electricity when we get to the stage, or we can use it as a raw material to put into something like data and export the data from the centres as an economic job dividend. You know, I always feel 2030, we'll have loads of people saying, "Now this was the plan all along." But there'll be a stage, won't there, when we have generated so much renewable energy that we can't consume it ourselves, and we have a choice. Do we continue to develop is it 20, 30, 40 gigawatts of potential, of which we can only consume 4, 5, 6, 7 ourselves? And I think that's going to be the interesting part of what will we do. If it was gold, I know what they'd be doing, right? If it was oil back in the day, you can be sure. But I think that's where the latter part of this decade that you and I and all people will have to look at it as an actual asset to the nation. And how do we maximize that to the nation? Either data or just export the electrons. What's your own view on that? Where it's early, obviously, because we're still getting to fulfill our own requirements, but your own sense on it with data
I
and
think
data centers and stuff.
you're hitting the nail on right on the head, Gary. Like it's not only that we have a lot of it, we have far more wind energy than we can ever use ourselves, but we're actually the Saudi Arabia of wind energy, where wind is our oil and the turbine is our shovel, and we just have to figure out how to get it out of the ground and deliver to people. And the reason I'm saying that is, I think in Ireland we all know we've a lot of wind. You just go outside and anyone can verify that for you. I think what people in Ireland forget is how lucky we are to have it, because there's so many other countries that can't find renewable energy. Like literally, you know, we all know that the Green Deal is being agreed out in Europe right now. They don't know where to find the renewable electricity that they need. They're looking for places to get it. So there's only a handful of us, you know, the likes of Denmark, the North Seas, the Atlantic Ocean, Portugal, Ireland. There's about a short handful of countries that can literally say, well, not only do we have enough for ourselves, but we have loads that we could help supply others with.
Yeah,
So like the opportunity there, and when you look at that, like, yes, we can use some ourselves and we should absolutely make sure we, let's say, have a clean energy sector for Ireland. But then you want to send it elsewhere to make sure that you're creating an industry here in Ireland. And you can either, you know, build data centers and put electricity to photons and export the photons. You can build hydrogen and put electricity into electrolyzers and create hydrogen, or you can build cables and export that electricity directly, or you can try and do some of all three. But we probably haven't figured out yet in Ireland what approach we want to do to that. But the one fundamental truth and fact is we have the ultimate resource, and any way we can try and make value of that resource is a huge benefit to the Irish economy, and something I'm not sure we fully appreciate the scale of that. And I think it's starting to turn now. Like if you look at the program for government, and who knows if it will be approved, we're sitting here right on the cusp of knowing if the Greens will vote and if they do or don't. But I think there's certainly people are starting to see that there is this massive resource, and we just need to figure out exactly how we're going to tap into it and get value from it.
I have one more question, but I have to just go back. That's a classic. Ireland is to wind what Saudi Arabia was to oil. Jesus, man, there's a book in that.
It is, and the shovel is our turbine.
The shovel is our turbine. Okay, well, there's a few books in it. So three words that you see as sort of that you either personal or business that you.
So the last few months, when I think of what I would like people to know a lot more, and the three words, it's wind energy delivered. So in Q1 this year, 47% of our electricity through the crisis came from clean, indigenous, local produced electricity. We kept the lights on through one of the toughest times in the country's history. Everything stayed working as we hoped, and we not only kept things moving, we broke records and smashed records all the way through it. And I suppose the one message I'd like people to take is, Ireland hasn't the best track record in climate action, but wind energy has shown that we can do amazing things when we set out a clear pathway and a clear plan. And through this last quarter or two with the pandemic, we've proved more than ever we can deliver clean energy when we have a clear plan and a clear vision.
Isn't it extraordinary that when we look at the Q1 numbers for wind, 47%, when we look at the Q1 numbers for GDP export, and we see that Ireland was the only positive exporter in that quarter. Why? Because of the renewable energy that continuously were feeding into pharmaceuticals, health services, and the digital factories, data centers that didn't stop working. And they were exporting all the time. And it's a great story because what it demonstrates for us in my world is that the data is the magic. The centers are like the barrel in your analogy, is they kept running. And all these tools and services that we're now having this conversation on, and this teaching and the schools and Netflix in the evening. I hope for your and for our both collective that the mood music changes slightly, that people get a better appreciation for nature, for reduction of carbon. You said about your child. I have seen spring, David, materialize outside this window for the first time in 40 years, I'd say, because I've always been walking by it, so let's hope let's hope that follows through, that the work you've done for the last 20 years as your organization, and I think you're in there 3-4 years. I hope you deliver on what is going to be a great story for the next decade. Thank you so much. Thank you always for your support to the hosting industry, by the way, because there's always a sense that the energy guys are always against. With you and Mark Foley, I see a new attitude towards data as an asset fueled by renewable energy and exported from Ireland. So thank you for always being accessible. Thank you for always rocking up and giving what you did today. Timely, accurate, honest, and enthusiastic information. So David Connolly, CEO of IWEA, always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Thanks a million.